In a quiet little town surrounded by green hills and old factories, there lived a woman named Alina. She wasn't rich, famous, or even noticed much by the people around her. Life had been tough on Alina from the very beginning. Her days were filled with hard work, cleaning houses, sewing torn clothes for neighbors, and running errands for anyone who needed help. But despite all the struggles, Alina had something special inside her that no one really knew about. Alina's home was small and simple, barely enough to keep her and her sick mother comfortable. They didn't have fancy furniture or expensive things, but they had each other. Every evening after finishing her long day of work, Alina would sit beside her mother, holding her frail hand and talking softly. Sometimes she'd hum gentle tunes, trying to lift their spirits. Music was Alina's escape, a way to forget, even for a moment, how difficult life could be. As a child, Alina had discovered an old, dusty piano in the corner of the local community center. It was battered and worn out, missing a few keys here and there, but it still made sounds when touched. Curious and eager to learn, young Alina spent hours experimenting with it. At first, the notes sounded clumsy and uneven, but over time, she figured out how to make them flow together. Without any teacher or guide, Alina taught herself how to play melodies that came straight from her heart. The more she practiced, the better she became. One crisp morning, as the sun peeked through the cracks in the wooden shutters of Mrs. Whitmore's grand house, Alina arrived clean. The mansion was everything Alina's life wasn't. Large, luxurious, and filled with things she could never afford. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, expensive rugs covered polished floors, and every corner seemed to whisper of wealth and privilege. As Alina worked quietly, dusting shelves and sweeping marble floors, she couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation between Mrs. Whitmore and her friends. Mrs. Whitmore, a tall woman with sharp features and an even sharper tongue, was hosting a small gathering in her parlor. Her guests sipped tea from delicate china cups while discussing plans for an upcoming gala at the estate. The event was set to be the talk of the town, complete with fine dining, live entertainment, and the unveiling of Mrs. Whitmore's latest acquisition, a so-called antique piano. From what Alina gathered, the piano was more of a novelty than a functional instrument. It had been purchased at an auction as part of Mrs. Whitmore's collection of eccentric items, though it was clear that no one expected it to actually produce music. "It's charmingly broken," one guest remarked with a laugh. "The keys are all crooked, and half of them don't even work." "Yes, isn't it delightful?" Mrs. Whitmore replied, her voice dripping with mockery. "We'll have someone pretend to play it during the gala. A bit of comic relief, you know." The room erupted in giggles, and Alina felt a pang of discomfort. She continued working, trying to stay invisible, but her curiosity got the better of her. Who would they ask to play the broken piano? And why did the idea of it make her feel uneasy? As if sensing her presence, Mrs. Whitmore glanced up and caught Alina's eye. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Alina froze, afraid she'd been caught eavesdropping. But instead of scolding her, Mrs. Whitmore smirked. "Well, well," she said, addressing her friends. "Why not let her do it? Our dear maid Alina here looks like just the person for the job. After all, who better to play a useless piano than someone equally unremarkable?" Her words stung, cutting deeper than Alina cared to admit. Yet, despite the insult, Alina didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened her back, looked Mrs. Whitmore in the eye, and nodded slowly. "If that's what you'd like, Mom," she said softly, her tone calm but firm. Mrs. Whitmore raised an eyebrow, surprised by Alina's lack of protest. "Very well, then. Consider it your contribution to the evening." With that, she turned back to her guests, dismissing Alina as easily as one might swat away a fly. Later that day, as Alina walked home, she replayed the conversation in her mind. Part of her wanted to refuse, to tell Mrs. Whitmore that she wouldn't be made fun of like that. But another part of her saw this as an opportunity, however strange it might seem. She knew how to make broken pianos sing. She'd done it countless times before. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to show the world something they hadn't seen yet. Even if they laughed at first, she thought, perhaps they'd remember the music long after the laughter faded. With that glimmer of determination lighting her path, Alina decided to accept the challenge, not out of spite or revenge, but because deep down, she believed in the power of her music. Whatever happened at the gala, she vowed to give it her all. The night of the gala finally arrived, and Alina stood nervously in a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit her slender frame. It was too big around the waist and hung awkwardly on her shoulders, but she had done her best to make it presentable. She tugged at the sleeves self-consciously as she lingered near the edges of the grand ballroom, trying not to draw attention to herself. The room buzzed with energy. Elegant guests dressed in shimmering gowns and tailored suits moved gracefully from one corner to another, their laughter mingling with the clinking of champagne glasses. Alina felt out of place amidst all the glamour. Her hands, calloused from years of hard work, felt heavy at her sides, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone could see right through her. Servants hurried past her carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres, barely sparing her a glance. To them, she was just another face in the crowd, someone unimportant who didn't belong in such a setting. Even though she had been invited, or rather, instructed, to perform, she couldn't help but feel like an outsider looking in. Finally, the moment came when Mrs. Whitmore stepped up to address her guests. Dressed in a dazzling gown adorned with jewels, she raised her glass and smiled brightly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying across the room, "tonight is a celebration of art, elegance, and a touch of whimsy." She paused for dramatic effect, glancing toward Alina with a sly smirk. "As part of our festivities, we have prepared a special surprise, a performance on my latest acquisition, a truly unique antique piano." A ripple of amusement spread through the crowd as servants wheeled the broken piano into the center of the room. Its once polished surface was now dull and scratched, its keys yellowed and uneven. Some were missing entirely, leaving gaps where notes should have been. A few guests chuckled openly, while others exchanged amused whispers. Clearly, this was meant to be a joke, an entertaining diversion before the real entertainment began. Mrs. Whitmore gestured dramatically toward Alina. "And now, allow me to introduce the star of this little spectacle, our very own Alina." She said the name with exaggerated flair, as though introducing royalty. But the mocking undertone was impossible to miss. "She's graciously agreed to play for us tonight. Let's give her a round of applause." Polite clapping followed, though it was clear most people were more amused than impressed. Alina took a deep breath and stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. As she approached the piano, she could feel dozens of eyes watching her every move. Some gazes were curious, others dismissive, but none held any expectation of greatness. To them, she was just a poor maid playing along with a silly prank. Sitting down on the bench, Alina placed her hands gently on the damaged keys. For a brief moment, she hesitated, overwhelmed by the weight of judgment pressing down on her. But then she closed her eyes and let her fingers rest lightly on the cool surface. She reminded herself why she had agreed to this, not for revenge or recognition, but because she loved music. This battered old piano might seem useless to everyone else, but to Alina, it was simply another instrument waiting to share its voice. As the murmurs in the room faded into silence, Alina steadied herself. Whatever happened next, she knew she wouldn't hold back. She would play, not for their approval, but for the sheer joy of making something beautiful rise from the ruins. The room grew quiet as Alina placed her hands on the broken piano, her fingers hovering above the chipped and uneven keys. For a moment, she simply sat there, motionless, as if gathering her thoughts, or perhaps summoning courage. The guests exchanged glances, some smirking, others leaning forward with mild curiosity. No one expected much. After all, how could anyone produce anything resembling music from such a damaged instrument? To them, this was still just a joke, a fleeting bit of entertainment before they returned to their conversations and champagne. But then, Elena began to play. At first, the notes were hesitant, almost shy, as though testing the limits of the battered piano. A soft melody emerged, simple yet haunting, filling the silence that had settled over the room. Some guests raised their eyebrows in surprise, unsure of what they were hearing. It wasn't perfect. The missing keys forced gaps in the tune, and certain chords sounded slightly off. But there was something undeniably captivating about it. Elena's touch carried an emotion that no one had anticipated, a depth that seemed to resonate beyond the flaws of the instrument. As she continued, her confidence grew. Elena leaned into the challenge, adapting her technique to compensate for the piano's shortcomings. When a key didn't work, she improvised, weaving new notes seamlessly into the melody. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, coaxing sounds from the broken piano that no one thought possible. What started as a tentative exploration transformed into a breathtaking performance, each note flowing effortlessly into the next. The melody swelled, wrapping around the room like a warm embrace, pulling everyone deeper into its spell. By now, the crowd was completely silent. Gone were the whispers, the amused smiles, the dismissive glances. Every eye was fixed on Elena, every ear tuned to the music spilling from her hands. Even Mrs. Whitmore, who had intended this moment to be little more than a light-hearted jest, found herself staring in awe. Her arms, once crossed confidently over her chest, now hung limply at her sides. She had never imagined that the woman she regarded as invisible could command such attention, or evoke such emotion. Elena played as if the world outside the ballroom didn't exist. Her body swayed gently with the rhythm, her face calm and focused. There was no trace of nervousness or self-doubt now, only pure passion. Each note seemed to tell a story, painting pictures of struggle, resilience, and hope. It was as if the piano itself had come alive under her touch, shedding its brokenness to reveal the beauty hidden within. When the final chord rang out, the room remained utterly still. For a few heartbeats, there was only silence, the kind of silence that comes when something extraordinary has happened, and no one knows quite how to respond. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. The sound was tentative at first, but it quickly grew louder as others joined in. Within moments, the entire room erupted into applause, the noise echoing off the high ceilings and crystal chandeliers. Elena opened her eyes, blinking as if waking from a dream. She looked out at the sea of astonished faces, many of which were now standing to show their appreciation. Some people wiped away tears, while others simply stared in disbelief. In that moment, Elena realized she had done far more than play a song. She had silenced doubt, shattered assumptions, and reminded everyone present of the power of art to transcend even the most broken circumstances. As the applause filled the room, Elena sat frozen on the piano bench, her hands resting lightly on the keys. She hadn't expected this reaction, not the standing ovation, not the tears in some guests' eyes, and certainly not the overwhelming sense of awe that now hung thick in the air. For a moment, she felt like she was dreaming. How could something so ordinary to her, playing music, have caused such an extraordinary response? The weight of it all settled over her, leaving her unsure of what to do next. Finally, she stood up slowly, her borrowed dress swishing softly as she moved. Her cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and pride, but she kept her head held high. Guests rushed toward her, eager to shake her hand or offer words of praise. Some called her brilliant and talented, while others simply stared at her in wonder, unable to find the right words. A man in a tailored suit approached her, his face glowing with admiration. "That was incredible," he stammered. "You turned that broken thing into magic." Elena smiled softly, her voice quiet but steady. "Thank you," she said simply, unsure of how else to respond. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and the sudden flood of compliments left her feeling both grateful and overwhelmed. Despite the whirlwind around her, she remained calm, her humility shining through every word and gesture. Mrs. Whitmore, who had been standing nearby, finally pushed her way through the crowd. Her expression was unreadable, a strange mix of shock, admiration, and perhaps even guilt. She reached out tentatively, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder. I had no idea," she admitted, her voice quieter than usual. "You truly are remarkable." Elena met her gaze without resentment. "The piano may be broken," she replied gently, "but it can still make music. Sometimes we just have to listen differently." Her words carried a depth that silenced those around her, making them pause and reflect. It wasn't just about the piano. It was about seeing potential where others saw only imperfection. Word of Elena's performance spread quickly throughout the mansion. Guests who hadn't been in the ballroom during her playing clamored to hear about it, while others begged her to play again. But Elena politely declined, explaining that the moment had been special because it was unexpected. She didn't want to diminish its impact by repeating it too soon. Instead, she stepped back, allowing the evening to continue, though the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The gala, which had started as a showcase of wealth and privilege, had transformed into something far more meaningful, a celebration of resilience, creativity, and the human spirit. As the night wore on, Elena found herself cornered by curious guests asking questions about her life and her music. Where had she learned to play? Did she compose her own pieces? Would she ever consider performing professionally? Elena answered each question honestly, sharing bits of her story without embellishment. She spoke of her childhood spent experimenting with the old community center piano, of teaching herself melodies by ear, and of finding solace in music during life's hardest moments. Her sincerity resonated deeply with everyone who listened, turning her from a mysterious maid into a symbol of hope and perseverance. By the time the gala began winding down, Elena knew her life would never be the same. Though she hadn't sought fame or recognition, she couldn't deny the shift in how people saw her. No longer invisible, she had become unforgettable. And as she walked home that night under the starlit sky, she felt a quiet confidence blooming within her. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it, not for the applause, but because she believed in the power of her music to inspire others, just as it had inspired her. The next morning, Elena woke up to a world that suddenly seemed different. News of her performance at the gala had spread like wildfire, not just through the town, but far beyond it. Local newspapers ran headlines like, "The Maid Who Made Music from Brokenness," and "A Star is Born in the Most Unexpected Place." Reporters knocked on her door, eager to interview her, while neighbors who had barely noticed her before now stopped by with congratulations and kind words. It was overwhelming, yet strangely heartwarming. Among the attention came offers, lots of them. Music producers called, asking if she'd be interested in recording an album. Wealthy patrons offered to sponsor private lessons with renowned teachers or buy her expensive instruments. Some even suggested she move to the city, where opportunities for fame awaited. At first, Elena listened politely, grateful for the support. But as the days passed, she realized none of these paths felt right for her. Fame wasn't what she wanted. She didn't play music to become rich or famous. Her gift was meant for something deeper, for sharing hope, for inspiring others, for giving back to the community that had shaped her. With this clarity, Elena made a decision. She turned down most of the extravagant offers, instead focusing on something close to her heart, restoring the old community center where she had first learned to play piano. For years, the building had fallen into disrepair, its walls cracked and its roof leaking. The once beloved space was now little more than a forgotten relic. Elena envisioned turning it into a vibrant hub of creativity, a free music school for children who, like her, might not otherwise have access to such opportunities. Her vision quickly gained traction. Donations poured in from people inspired by her story, including many who had attended the gala. Mrs. Whitmore herself contributed generously, funding repairs and helping purchase new instruments. Within months, the community center was transformed. Fresh paint brightened the walls, sturdy chairs replaced broken ones, and shiny pianos lined the practice rooms. A large banner hung above the entrance, reading Alina's Melodies, where every note matters. Word of the music school spread, drawing kids of all ages from across the town. Some were shy beginners, hesitant to touch the keys, while others arrived brimming with enthusiasm. Alina welcomed each child warmly, teaching them not just how to play, but also how to find joy in their own unique voices. She often shared stories of her own journey, the struggles, the doubts, and the moments of triumph, to remind them that talent could bloom anywhere, even in the most unlikely places. One day, as she watched a group of students practicing together, laughter filling the room, Alina felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was why she played music, not for applause or accolades, but to create something lasting, something that could change lives. The broken piano at the gala had opened doors she never imagined, but it was here, in this humble space, that her true legacy would take root. Through every lesson, every smile, and every note played, Alina proved that music wasn't just about perfection. It was about connection, resilience, and the power to transform brokenness into beauty. Weeks after the gala, Alina's life had changed in ways she could never have predicted. The once invisible maid was now a local hero, celebrated not just for her talent, but for her humility and grace. Yet, amidst all the admiration and newfound opportunities, one relationship still lingered unresolved: her complicated dynamic with Mrs. Whitmore. Though the wealthy woman had played a role in Alina's rise by inviting her to perform at the gala, her initial intentions had been far from kind. Alina hadn't forgotten the mocking tone or the dismissive remarks that preceded her performance, but she also knew that people weren't always defined by their worst moments. One crisp afternoon, as Alina was tidying up the newly renovated community center, she heard a soft knock on the door. She turned to see Mrs. Whitmore standing there, looking unusually hesitant. Gone was the sharp-edged confidence she usually carried. Instead, she seemed almost fragile, clutching her purse tightly, as if searching for courage. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Finally, Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat and said, "May I come in?" Alina nodded, stepping aside to let her enter. The contrast between them was striking. Mrs. Whitmore dressed in an elegant coat, her polished shoes clicking softly against the wooden floor, while Alina wore simple clothes dusted with chalk from cleaning the blackboards. Despite their differences, there was a quiet understanding in the air. "I wanted to apologize," Mrs. Whitmore began, her voice trembling slightly. "What I said to you that day, it was cruel. I treated you as though you didn't matter, and I couldn't have been more wrong. You showed me, and everyone else, that true worth has nothing to do with wealth or status. It's about what's inside." Alina listened patiently, her expression calm and thoughtful. When Mrs. Whitmore finished, she paused, waiting for a response. But instead of anger or resentment, Alina offered a small, forgiving smile. "We all make mistakes," she said gently. "What matters is how we move forward afterward. And you've already done so much to help this place. That speaks louder than any words." Mrs. Whitmore blinked back tears, visibly moved by Alina's kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're a better person than I'll ever be." From that day on, something shifted between them. Mrs. Whitmore became one of the music school's most dedicated supporters, using her influence to bring in more resources and attention. She organized fundraisers and invited influential friends to visit, ensuring the program thrived. Slowly but surely, she began to change, not just in how she treated Alina, but in how she saw the world. Her arrogance softened, replaced by a genuine desire to uplift others. For Alina, this transformation was proof that forgiveness could heal wounds and build bridges. She didn't hold grudges. Life had taught her that bitterness only weighed people down. Instead, she chose to focus on the good that could come from even the hardest situations. Through Mrs. Whitmore's redemption, Alina inspired others to reflect on their own actions and consider how they treated those around them. The bond between the two women grew stronger over time, becoming a testament to the power of second chances. Together, they proved that no matter how broken things might seem, even relationships, there was always hope for repair. And as the music school flourished under their combined efforts, it stood as a reminder that unity and compassion could turn even the unlikeliest partnerships into forces for positive change. Years passed, and Alina's story became a legend in the small town and beyond. The broken piano that had once been a symbol of mockery was now displayed proudly in the community center, encased in glass like a treasured artifact. A plaque beside it read, "From brokenest to beauty." This piano reminds us that greatness can emerge from imperfection. Visitors from neighboring towns and even distant cities came to see it, often staying to attend concerts or enroll their children in Alina's music school. What had started as a humble dream had blossomed into something extraordinary, a beacon of hope and resilience for generations to come. Alina herself never sought fame or fortune, despite countless offers to perform on bigger stages or record albums. Instead, she remained rooted in her community, pouring her energy into nurturing young musicians. Her students flourished under her guidance, many going on to pursue careers in music, while others simply carried the joy of playing with them throughout their lives. Each success story filled Alina with pride, knowing she had played a part in helping these children discover their potential. Mrs. Whitmore, too, found purpose in supporting Alina's mission. Once known for her wealth and sharp tongue, she became beloved for her generosity and humility. She often visited the community center, sitting quietly in the back during recitals and clapping enthusiastically alongside the parents. Her transformation inspired others to rethink their assumptions about people, about who they were and what they could become. Together, Alina and Mrs. Whitmore proved that change was possible when hearts opened and hands reached out to lift each other up. The community center itself became a cornerstone of the town, hosting not just music lessons, but art classes, storytelling sessions, and cultural events. It brought people together, bridging divides and fostering connections among neighbors who might otherwise never have interacted. On weekends, the courtyard buzzed with laughter and chatter as families gathered for picnics and performances. The space wasn't just a building. It was a home for creativity, belonging, and shared dreams. As Alina grew older, her hair streaked with silver and her hands showing signs of age, she continued to teach. Though she no longer performed publicly, her presence alone was enough to inspire those around her. One evening, as she sat watching a group of her students play a duet on the grand piano she'd helped acquire, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had done what she set out to do, not for recognition, but to leave the world a little brighter than she'd found it. When Alina eventually passed away, the entire town mourned her loss. But her legacy lived on. In the melodies that echoed through the community center, in the lives she had touched, and in the belief that everyone, no matter how overlooked, had something valuable to offer. The broken piano remained at the heart of it all, a silent witness to the power of determination, forgiveness, and the human spirit. And so, Alina's story endured, not as a tale of fame or riches, but as a reminder that true greatness lies not in perfection, but in the courage to create beauty from the fragments of life.